Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today I will analyze the case of Rahul Gupta. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. Rahul Gupta was born on October 13, 1989, and was raised in McLean, Virginia. His parents had moved from India to Washington, D.C. in 1986 and operated a successful printing business. When Rahul was in high school, he met a classmate named Mark Edward Waugh, and they became friends. Both Rahul and Mark were very good students and had a promising future. After graduating from high school, Rahul attended George Washington University and studied biomedical engineering. There he met a woman named Taylor Gold, and they became romantically involved during their senior year. In May 2012, they both graduated. Rahul started working on his master's degree. Taylor had a full-time job and covered some of Rahul's expenses. In February 2013, Rahul moved into Taylor's apartment, located in the Blair East Apartments in Silver Spring, Maryland. She lived in apartment 1601, which was an efficiency. The unit was very small. Rahul maintained his friendship with Mark Waugh, who was in his first year of law school. All three individuals, Rahul, Taylor, and Mark, were 23 years old at this time. Now moving to the timeline of the crime. On Sunday, October 13, 2013, at 3:25 a.m., Taylor Gold called 911 and said, "My friend he's here, and I need emergency right now." When the operator asked what was happening, Taylor responded, "I don't know." The operator said, "What's going on?" Taylor answered, "Nothing." Later, when the operator again asked what was happening, Taylor responded, "I need someone here. There's blood everywhere." The police arrived at 3:36 a.m. and encountered Taylor at the entrance to her apartment. She was described as very intoxicated. They detained her, and officers entered the apartment. There they found Rahul on the floor near the bed, covered in blood. He was next to Mark Waugh, who was dead. When the police asked Rahul what happened, he responded, quote, "They were cheating. My girlfriend was cheating on me. My buddy and my girlfriend were cheating. I walked in on my buddy and my girlfriend cheating. I killed my buddy." Unquote. Here is what the police found during the course of their investigation. Mark had been stabbed on the left side of his neck, on his upper chest, on the right side of his back, and 3 times on his left arm. He had been stabbed 6 times in total. Mark also sustained 5 cutting injuries to the fingers on his left hand and to his left forearm. The murder weapon was an 8-inch kitchen knife, which was found under Mark's leg. The police were able to piece together the events leading up to the stabbing. Earlier that night, on Saturday, October 12, 2013, Rahul and Taylor made their way to the DuPont Circle neighborhood of Washington, D.C., to celebrate Rahul's 24th birthday, which was Sunday. After eating dinner, they went to a bar where they met with 2 of Rahul's friends, Mark Waugh, who I mentioned earlier, and Josh White. After consuming several drinks, the group of 4 made their way to a different bar where they continued consuming alcohol. Rahul and Josh went outside to smoke marijuana, where Josh told him that Taylor had been flirting with him. As this was happening, Taylor and Mark were inside the bar, where Taylor told Mark that Josh had been flirting with her. So there was a difference of opinion here about who was flirting with whom. Josh was blaming Taylor, and Taylor was blaming Josh. After the group went to another bar, Mark told Rahul that Josh was trying to make a move on Taylor. Josh denied the accusation and decided to leave. He returned to his apartment in the Woodley Park neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Rahul, Taylor, and Mark took a taxi to Taylor's apartment in Silver Spring. They arrived at 1:50 a.m., now on Sunday, October 13, 2013. Taylor said she wanted Mark to be there to function as a witness as to what happened between her and Josh at the bar. Mark could help explain to Rahul what actually happened. The 3 individuals consumed alcohol in Taylor's apartment, and Rahul smoked more marijuana. They sat on the couch and played video games. Mark sent 3 text messages to a friend of his, which suggested there was some kind of tension in the apartment. At 2:01 a.m., he wrote, My night is becoming historically awkward. At 2:19 a.m., Mark wrote, I'm about to gnaw my hand off so I can leave in the ambulance. And at 2:55 a.m., he sent his final message, writing, Awake? I need help. All 3 text messages were sent from the bathroom. The 911 call was placed a half hour after the last text message was sent by Mark. Both Rahul and Taylor claimed they could not clearly remember what happened to Mark. It seemed pretty clear to the police that either Rahul or Taylor perpetrated the stabbing. There were only 3 people in the apartment, and one of them was dead. Now they just had to figure out which one of them was responsible. When the police interviewed them at the police station, Rahul claimed that he didn't remember what happened, but he knew that he did not stab Mark. Taylor said she didn't remember what happened and did not know if she stabbed Mark or not. The police believed Taylor and became convinced that Rahul had stabbed Mark to death. So Rahul was guilty and Taylor was innocent. Rahul was arrested and charged with murder. About a year and a half later, on March 2, 2015, Rahul went on trial. Here is what he said when he testified in his own defense. On the night of the killing, Taylor was upset with him and upset with Mark. To give everybody a chance to cool off, Mark recommended that he and Rahul leave Taylor's apartment. As Rahul was looking for his shoes, he fell and hit his head. When he stood up, he saw that Mark had been attacked. He yelled at Taylor to call 911 and administered first aid to Mark. Rahul claimed that he confessed to killing Mark in order to protect Taylor. On March 16, 2015, Rahul Gupta was convicted of first-degree murder. 11 days later, he was sentenced to life in prison. Now moving to my analysis. Rahul Gupta maintains his innocence, and he has a few supporters. They argue that Taylor must have been the killer. Rahul was Mark's friend and tried to help him after he was stabbed. He would never have stabbed his friend to death. The state of Maryland, of course, disagrees. They argue that Taylor was more credible than Rahul, and the physical evidence collected at the scene makes Rahul look guilty. This brings me to the question, was Rahul Gupta guilty of murder? Let's take a look at the evidence, both for and against the idea that he was guilty, starting with the inculpatory factors. A few hours before the killing, Rahul, Taylor, Mark, and Josh were having a disagreement about whether Taylor was flirting or was she the target of flirtatious behavior. Based on text messages sent by Mark, it appears as though the argument continued when he, Rahul, and Taylor went to Taylor's apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland. When the police arrived at the apartment, they found Rahul next to Mark's dead body. Rahul was covered in blood. Taylor was 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighed 125 pounds. It would have been very difficult for her to have perpetrated the stabbing attack against Mark. For instance, the stab on Mark's back penetrated 7 inches and chipped a bone. Taylor did have some blood on her, but there was no blood on her face or in her hair. On the 911 call, Rahul could be heard saying, "Get the blank off me, don't touch me." This makes it seem like Taylor was touching Rahul because they were the only 2 people who were alive in the apartment. This may explain how she ended up with Mark's blood on her. Rahul killed Mark, and therefore the blood was on him. He transferred it to Taylor. Both Rahul and Taylor said they did not clearly remember what happened in the apartment, yet Rahul somehow remembered that he was not the killer. Taylor stated that she didn't know if she killed Mark or not. Rahul's story did not make sense. If he didn't remember anything, why was he so sure that he wasn't the killer? Taylor's story was consistent with her telling the truth. There was no way she could have known whether she was the killer or not. From jail, Rahul called his father and told him that he and Mark engaged in a fight. Mark tried to retrieve a knife, and Rahul got the knife. This puts the knife in Rahul's hand and does not match his story about getting up from the floor and seeing that Mark had been attacked. Now moving to the exculpatory factors, Taylor stated that she could not remember anything. She may have been telling the truth, but it's suspiciously convenient for her. When Taylor was asked by the police, "Did you kill Mark?" she responded, "I don't think so." She went on to say she couldn't imagine doing that, she was confused, and she was not trying to put the blame on the wrong person. After Rahul and Taylor were interviewed, the police put them in a room together, hoping to capture something incriminating on video. Rahul asked Taylor what happened and asked her if she had stabbed Mark or not. Taylor responded, "I don't think. I wouldn't do that. That is not an admission, but it's not a denial either." Before the police arrived, Taylor changed her clothes twice. One of Taylor's fingernails was broken, and one of her contact lenses was stuck to the back of Mark's jeans. Blonde hair was found on the murder weapon, stuck in a blood stain on the wall, and in one of Mark's hands. Taylor had blonde hair. The hair was never tested, but the state conceded that it probably belonged to Taylor. When considering all the evidence in this case, do I believe that Rahul Gupta was guilty of murder? Yes, in my opinion, he was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. His statement to his father from jail really damaged his case. It represented yet another change in Rahul's story. What do I think happened in this case? This is just a theory, my opinion. Rahul and Taylor were in a tumultuous romantic relationship. For instance, they argued about sex. When they went out to celebrate Rahul's birthday, they both became intoxicated. Some type of flirting behavior occurred. There is no way to know who is responsible. Alcohol may have caused or contributed to this behavior. Josh recognized that the situation was bad news and left. He made a wise decision. Mark, however, decided to stay with Rahul and Taylor, maybe because Taylor asked him to be a witness. Again, she wanted Mark to convince Rahul that she had not been flirting with Josh. All three ended up together in Taylor's apartment, where the argument continued. Mark sent text messages to a friend while in the bathroom. He was uncomfortable at the elevated level of tension and did not know how to respond. He was probably concerned because Rahul was demonstrating a lot of jealousy. Rahul had come to believe that Mark was flirting with Taylor, even though that was not one of the accusations made earlier when they were at the bar. Again, the debate at that time revolved around either Taylor or Josh flirting. Fueled by alcohol, Rahul eventually stabbed Mark to death in a rage. He confessed at the scene because he was guilty. When the effects of the alcohol lessened, he realized how the confession could put him in prison for life. Unhappy with that prospect, he offered two new versions of his story, one where Taylor could have been the killer and one where he acted in self-defense. Rahul didn't realize how having multiple versions of his story could be problematic. Now moving to my final thoughts. The murder of Mark Wall was solved because Rahul Gupta spoke to the police. Taylor Gold spoke to the police as well, but all she really said was that she didn't remember anything. If neither one of them had said anything to law enforcement, Rahul may have escaped responsibility. The police would have known that one of them was the killer, but there would have been no way to know who. There is actually another notorious stabbing case where something like this happened, and it occurred in the DuPont Circle neighborhood of Washington, D.C., the same neighborhood where the drinking adventure started on the night of Mark's murder. In 2006, a lawyer named Robert One was stabbed to death in a townhouse on Swan Street Northwest. 3 other men were in the house at the time of the murder. They claimed that an intruder was responsible, but the police did not believe their story. For example, there was no forced entry. They suspected that all 3 men were involved. At the very least, one of them had to be the killer. The problem is there was no way to prove who was responsible. Was one man the killer? Were 2 of them involved? Were all 3 responsible? Without them turning on one another, there was not enough evidence to determine what happened. They didn't talk to the police, and they were never charged with murder. Later, they were charged with obstruction, but ultimately, they were acquitted at a bench trial. The judge said that she believed they were guilty, but the state failed to meet its burden. I have a separate video about the case of Robert One. If Rahul and Taylor had adopted the same tactic of not making a statement, Rahul could have avoided life in prison. It's frightening how easily criminals could escape responsibility if they knew how to form a logical plan and stick to it. The problem, of course, is that the motive for a murder is often based on emotion, which is the enemy of critical thinking. Those are my thoughts on the case of Rahul Gupta. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. The case of Rahul Gupta is interesting for a few reasons, but there's one thing that really stands out to me here as far as the alcohol consumption. in theory, Rahul committed the murder because he was intoxicated. That was at least part of what happened. That is not the only contributing factor, but if the alcohol had been removed from the equation, I doubt the murder would have occurred. So alcohol played a key role in this case. Now, Rahul was reacting to some type of flirtatious behavior. There's no way to know who was flirting. There were various accusations. But it is reasonable to believe that whatever flirting was occurring was partially based on alcohol consumption as well. Taylor had been drinking, maybe she was flirting. Mark had been drinking, maybe he was flirting. So either way, alcohol could have contributed to that flirting behavior. So here we see how the effects of alcohol can lead to a chain reaction across multiple people. So Taylor or Mark were flirting based partially on alcohol consumption, and then Rahul reacted with homicidal behavior partially due to his alcohol consumption. So the effect of alcohol on one or two people allowed the effect of the alcohol on a third person to be activated, to become problematic in terms of homicide. I've seen this a lot with various cases, where it's not just a person becomes intoxicated and they commit a crime, but it's a chain reaction involving multiple people who are intoxicated. So really this whole idea of going out and bar hopping and becoming drunk with friends is ill-advised. It can lead to a chain reaction that is difficult to predict before one is intoxicated. So a person may say, well, I would never be violent after drinking, but they don't know that there might be some motivating factor introduced by somebody else's alcohol consumption. Somebody may provoke them because that person is drinking. Alcohol is a very dangerous nemesis which traps many people and destroys myriad lives.